But this is the perfect moment for me to do a Q&A while we're live here today. So this comes from Minotaur. He spells his name interestingly, Mihneatur on Instagram, who asked a question on another video in regards to, we've been doing this role-playing series. These videos have been popping off across TikTok and Instagram and everything. We may need to go somewhere where the weather is a little bit less than here, though, because, oh my goodness, that storm sounds really loud. But the question he asked was how to write a character. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that live here, and then it'll get clipped out later on over on YouTube for one of these ongoing videos discussing roleplay and stuff. There's also a storm going here. My goodness. Some shelter from the wind. How do you write a character? Well, he was specifically asking about, like, how do you come up with traits, defining things that make them unique, so on and so forth. And I think there's a couple of different ways you could do it. We're going to find a house to duck into. Get out of the wind. Ah, that's much better. We may have to deal with an NPC bark in here. We'll see. Go sneak up here. So, writing characters. In this game in particular, I would say it does a very unique character creation process because you start the game before you actually create your character. So I appreciate that the way this game does it, because you're actually given a little bit of information before you have a chance to go create your character, which means you don't necessarily need to know any meta, and you can make a decision after you have a little bit of information provided to you, which means you what do you know by the time you get to create the character in Skyrim. You actually know a few things. You're a prisoner in a wagon. You were caught with a bunch of criminals, and then you get a chance to create your race, your background, and everything else. And at that point, you can go through and read all of the racial descriptions and get everything you need to know. That's right, your name wasn't on the list. You actually know a few things at that point, which can influence how you create your character. Any one of those things can be a trigger point for creating your backgrounds, your defining traits and actions, because the game is going to tell you what the racial traits are, what the skills are, so on and so forth. Now, if you're talking another game, like, let's say you are coming into something for the first time completely cold. And I think that's probably what Minotaur's question is in relation to, like how to write a character from scratch, creating roleplay traits and roleplay idioms and weaknesses and things that you might want to put into your character to influence the roleplay. I think at that point, honestly, your imagination is the limit of where you can go. But the most interesting thing that I can think of when you're talking about creating a character from scratch and is that a hero, like one of the most boring types of characters to play is the prophesied one, the chosen one, or somebody who is a heroic character who has no flaws. Those things, to me, are extremely boring to play because it takes player agency out of the picture, and you're destined to win because you're the chosen one, or it was prophesied, or you're this heroic character who has 18 in all of your stats, which is why when we talk about the difference between role-playing and power fantasy, not that there's anything wrong with power fantasy, by the way. I played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 multiple times over the years, Icewind Dale 1 and 2, and by the time I'd played those games 5 or 6 times, I was absolutely using the tilde chat commands to enter the game and give myself 25 in all my stats and 50,000 starting gold and the best bow and the best staff or whatever, because I'd already played the game 5 or 6 times. But if you're talking from scratch, limitations are going to be the most interesting thing that you can give your character in terms of traits or things that make your character unique to whatever game world you're playing, whether it's Skyrim, Forgotten Realms, Warhammer, Starfinder, Pathfinder, Cyberpunk 2077, whatever game that you're going to be playing where you can create your own character from scratch. Now, some of those roleplay decisions, some of those traits and background things might only be in your head. The game might not support those things if you're talking a video game. It's a little easier to go in tabletop because you'll be able to work with the DM, with the Dungeon Master, Game Master, directly and be like, I want my character to be weak in this area. So, you know, let's make something up while we're on the fly here this morning, right? Like, let's say I want to, like in my case, I have a Bosmer, I have a Wood Elf character. Now, in mini games, I don't know about this. I didn't actually pay attention, and I don't have it open in front of me now to know what the limitations are for Wood Elves. But I know at least many other systems have something in place where there are racial pros and cons. I know that the current Dungeons and Dragons system has gotten away with that, and I think maybe even the current version of Pathfinder or Starfinder may have gotten away from that. But a lot of the old ways of doing things would be like Wood Elves are known for being highly dexterous, but being lesser in constitution, meaning they aren't as healthy as other races. So if you take a Wood Elf and compare them to a Dwarf, the Wood Elf is going to have more dexterity, the Dwarf is going to have more constitution. And on the flip side of that, the Dwarf is going to be more healthy, but not be a very dexterous character because they're short and stocky and roly-poly like penguins, right? So it is a trade-off. And if a game doesn't give you those types of limitations, you can input those own limitations on you. So one of the things you could do, and I said this the other day, was like this character, for my purposes, and we even talked about it earlier in this stream because someone asked, why aren't you using daggers? And I said, because this character only knows how to use a bow, because this character is a bow-wielding character. Now, why do I choose to only use a bow? That's just a personal preference. But if I wanted to, I could put a roleplay reason why he only uses bows. Maybe he fumbles. Maybe he has a magical curse where every time he picks up daggers, he fumbles them and they fall. Or maybe he's allergic to steel, and so if he touches steel, it burns his hands, and he has to wear gloves. You know, there are ways around that. But I could come up with various roleplay reasons why he doesn't ever use daggers. Maybe he has trauma related to daggers, and so he'll never touch daggers because of the trauma he has from when he was a kid, and you know, his uncle died by somebody stabbing him in the eyes with daggers. Like, we could come up with a dozen different reasons for why he never uses a dagger or never uses a sword or etc. Like,
you need to leave.
None of those reasons don't necessarily have to mean anything in the game, but they can mean something to you as a personal individual to give this character more flavor. Is somebody yelling at me that I need to leave? I might forget.
You need to leave.
Yep, hang on, we're gonna go outside. I'm getting yelled at really quick. I don't want to have the guards
I'll
called.
sell just about anything if it's worth my time.
Hang
Keep
on.
that in mind, will you?
Let's go find a different house to get into where there's no
I do
wind.
what's necessary so we can get by. Have to, since I can't count on my brother for anything.
Brenna's over here complaining. Is this a tavern?
Or to believe I ever complained about Riften being cold.
I think this might be the tavern. We might be okay to hang out here. There might be some
Could you describe the smell?
music in the background as well.
Horrible monster was turned inside out and then
The
exploded.
mages don't let us go in the
What did you do?
They said it's
It
not
was a
safe.
minor miscalculation.
The problem is there's going to be a lot of barking
I've
here
already
if I try to
corrected it
talk.
for future
Just say the
experiments.
words if you need a drink or something to eat.
This is why people have a problem at your college. Yellow.
Hang on, this might not work. Bethesda NPCs have lots of bark,
If
and
you're looking for
the bard is going to be singing very loudly.
my
Hang on.
Staying safe, I hope.
What about the longhouse?
You lost.
Keep your politics out of my chat. You have now been banned. Hang on, I gotta ban this person from TikTok. Putting political crap in my chat. Anyway, going back to like a wood elf character, like I said, the whole I don't use daggers. Some of those reasons, like I said, are purely my own reasons.
With a
Like,
belly full of mead.
they're just roleplay reasons for why my character won't use a dagger. They have there's no in-game limitation, there's no mechanic in place that says my character can't use daggers.
I'm sure you're right.
Like, none of that shit matters because it's something that I made up as a background trait.
I can't believe Dagger allows him to stay there.
God, every single one of these buildings has a bunch of NPCs that are just gonna bark and interrupt. I think we're just gonna stand outside and deal with the weather. There is the limitations of a game when you're creating a character. Are there racial pros and cons? Are there pros and cons to a certain background? Many different games, whether it's Skyrim, Pillars of Eternity, Cyberpunk, Fallout, Starfield, like so many different games give you an option when you're creating of a background. They give you an option of perks. They give you an option of different classes that you can choose from. You can pick different starting abilities that you can choose from. Most games have those types of things in place, but if you're creating from scratch, you do have to reach into your imagination. The other thing I can always look at is if you're in doubt and it's your first time doing something, you can always go back and think about what are some of the characters that you loved the most from a book series or a movie series or a TV show, and what are those things that made that character really interesting to you. Use that as a starting point. So I know when I was a kid, as an example, I would look at Han Solo and be like, I want every character that I play to be like Han Solo. Well, the reality is Han Solo has a lot of character flaws, right? So yes, he's charismatic, so he's probably got a high charisma. He's very good at persuasion, right? But he also has shitty luck. Without a shadow of a doubt, Han Solo has very bad luck. He is constantly having issues with various criminal underlords and other things where he has very bad luck. He has good charisma, and he can talk himself out of situations many times, and he's reasonably good with the blaster, but he has bad luck, and he continually finds himself on the wrong end of deals. And so Han Solo is an interesting character in that he's very charismatic, and he's fun to play, and he's fun to watch on screen, but very quickly you realize that he's always in debt, he's always losing, he's got bad luck. So you could give him a high charisma, you could give him a reasonable dexterity, but he's going to have, like, if there's a luck factor in there or a perk that says bad things happen to this character for some weird reason, like that would be a negative perk that you could put on Han Solo as a character. And Luke Skywalker as an example. You could look at all of these characters that you grew up with at least when I was a kid. I think there's also something to be said where once you've played enough games or watched enough shows or played enough tabletop, whatever, you're going to see similar backgrounds and perks show up in pretty much every single game. So whether we're playing Outer Worlds 2 or Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 or, whatever insert name of RPG game here, Skyrim, there will be things like your character doesn't need to eat food anymore because you've developed this perk. So why doesn't your character need to eat as much as other characters? What is the roleplay reason for that background? There's also something to be said just for after you've been doing this long enough, like I have, you're going to have 8 or 10 different types of characters that you like to play that you're going to always sort of recreate in most games that you play. So I always have a thief character. Almost always it's going to be a thief character. If I'm playing like a tabletop or a top-down turn-based RPG, I'm going to play a thief character who can pick locks, do all those things. If I'm playing a game like Skyrim or an open world first-person RPG, and I play these games in first person, I'm probably going to play a thief/archer. The reason I don't necessarily play archers always in turn-based is because in turn-based I have a top-down view and I feel better doing backstabs, and I have a better layout of the field, and it slows the combat way down, and it's strategic maneuvering and so on and so forth. I don't like trying to be backstabber when I'm playing first person or even third person. I'm not a big fan of doing like backstabby characters when I'm playing these types of action RPGs because it's in the moment. So I much prefer just being a ranged character and not deal with the whole positioning. So it kind of just depends on if I'm doing top-down, turn-based, or live action. But I always start with a thief character every game I play. Second character is always a mage. The third character is usually a fighter, which are the three archetypes for most games. You're going to have your fighter, your mage, your thief character. And that gives me a pretty rounded ability to play through the different storylines of the games without repeating too much of the story, because I can play these three main branches and this DLC with this character, these main branches and this DLC with this character, and then do the things I haven't seen with a different one. And each one of those characters, like this character, like I said, one of the traits of this character is that he won't use weapons. Now, I don't have a roleplay reason for doing that. That's just my personal preference of saying I don't want to deal with melee in this game. Because let's be honest, I don't play Skyrim for the combat, kids. I play Skyrim for the cool fucking storylines, the voiceovers, the ambiance, the atmosphere, the music, the world. I don't play Skyrim for combat. Matter of fact, I don't play any Bethesda game, generally speaking, for the combat. Although I do enjoy the VAT system in the Fallout games, and I do love the gun combat in Starfield. But in terms of Elder Scrolls games, I've never played these games for the combat. I play these games for the story. It's the story. It's the amazing voice acting. It's the music. It's the visuals. That's why I love Elder Scrolls games. And it has some really deep class building mechanics where you can really get in there and play around with builds. And every game does it slightly different, but we have lots of different ways to customize your characters and create really unique builds that are unique to pretty much every single person. Yeah. I think that some of it is imagination. Some of it is just coming up and looking at things that you enjoy in other movies or films or games and look at those characters and say, what were their pros and cons and how can I recreate that for myself? And then sitting down and discussing what do you need from there. The most recent book series I wrote, we drew heavily upon two different... I say we because my brother and I did the story together and I did all the writing. But our inspiration, because it was a tabletop RPG, book series, and point-and-click adventure game all in one. So we did all three things at the same time with our game studio. That project, when we looked at it, we had two main sources of inspiration. Dragonlance and the movie Willow. And the movie Willow, not just the movie Willow, but also the World of Willow, the book series that George Lucas did with Clarence, and also the show they did on Disney Plus a couple years back. And so looking at the Dragonlance, not the novels per se, but just the entirety of what Dragonlance is. And for those of you who don't know Dragonlance beyond the novels, it was a tabletop module rule set before it was ever a series of novels. And so that's why we started with the tabletop RPG, then built the point-and-click adventure game and the novel series simultaneously. And we looked at what did we really enjoy in the Dragonlance books, and we looked at the main characters and we broke those main characters down and said we're going to make our own version of those characters, but we're going to make differences and tweaks to that. And when it came time to have like a Tasselhoff type, comedic character in the party for the sense of adventure, we came up with our own race of creatures called the Fae, the Brownies we called them. And we looked then and we said, well, how do we make our own Brownies unique? And we said, well, let's look at, we really liked the Brownies in Willow, but we also loved the halflings that they had in the movie Willow. So then we combined those two things with a couple of other things, and we came up with our own unique version of a winged fairy-like creature that were a mix of the brownies in the movie Willow mixed with some other brownies from other things, and then we created our own unique series of races for that particular world. And that was just taking what we already knew had worked somewhere else and then applying that same brush but just tweaking things and using that as a basis of inspiration for what we were doing and creating our own unique take on things. And then, of course, having a completely original storyline that just was inspired by characters from other things. And that's the best place to start when you're looking for how to write a character, is to look at the other series, books, movies, films, etc. that have done things that you like. And if you're having a struggle on your own to come up with like how to create your own original backstories, traits, and defining things, look at what's already been done before. Why did you like those things, and how can you replicate that in what you're doing? Anyway, that turned into a 20-minute discussion on how to write a background for a character. But that was a question asked by Minotaur on Instagram, spelled Mihneatur. So this will get out on YouTube later on. And for those of you watching live, this is the perfect example of make sure you ask questions, because you never know when I might turn it into a long-form video for YouTube. And as always, we're live on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, and TikTok. We're about to get back to playing the game here in a minute. And if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.